Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I have a layout process video for you based on the Load Challenge. And the Load Challenge is the Layout a Day Challenge, and that is hosted over on the Scrap Happy website. So go over to scraphappy.org to find out more info. We have a whole month of scrapping every day, and each day has a prompt, well actually two prompts. There's a story prompt and a technique prompt. And this month we are working around the theme of Harry Potter. Now, your layouts don't have to have anything to do with Harry Potter, but all of the prompts are inspired by Harry Potter. So today's prompt was to talk about which magic spell or magic potion inspires a story for you, and also to use some magical drippy goodness on your layout and some stars. So I am talking about how the time seems to have flown by between when my daughter was born and when she just had her 13th birthday, as if by magic the time has flown by. So that's how I interpreted this prompt for today, and I am definitely going to use lots of drippy goodness on my layout. And these watercolors are called Twinkling H2Os. This is an older product. I believe the company has been or this product has been purchased by another company and they're making it. So I'll put a link in the show notes about these particular watercolor paints. And I'll speed you up here through my process. I'm going to use these two photos to inspire my colors. I wanted to turn the baby photo into black and white just because it had some distraction in it, and I thought it would be less distracting in black and white, and it also kind of evokes a feeling of time passing, so the black and white being more in the past and the full bright color photo being more present and in the present. So I'm using this Vicki Boutin mixed media paper pad, and I'm just taking it off screen to trim off the perforations of that paper. And here I am back on screen, and I've got my paper ready to go. And I am just grabbing some clean water, and I'm going to start laying down some water on this paper. And what that does is it's going to give my watercolor paints a path to flow on. The watercolor paints will move around in the wet zone, but when it reaches a dry edge, it'll stop. So that is called a wet on wet technique with watercoloring, and it's something I do often. And I'm pulling some of that water down to help guide some drips. So if you don't want to just leave it all up to chance, you can help it along by guiding some drips there. And we'll speed this process up again some more, and I'm just making puddles of color. And the reason I do this is, you'll see in a moment, I just like to pull the color onto my page and then use gravity to help it flow. And I like this. It seems to give it a more natural flow than if I were just to add color straight to the page. So this is a technique I use when I want to let gravity help me out. You can see a little bit how those little paths that I made with the paintbrush are drawing the water down. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a second color. I'm going to add some gold into this. It just brings in a more magical element, and it kind of softens the black. Black can be a little harsh for baby photos, but I think that gold just adds the right touch. I'm going to set that aside and let it dry, and while that is drying, I am actually going to use the leftover paint on my table. And here you can see I've actually already done that. I use just a scratch piece of paper and I pick up colors, I dry it, I pick up more color, I dry it until I'm satisfied with my extra piece. And that gives me some mixed media papers to play with later. And now I'm back with a dry project. You can see how much shine it has with that gold, and where there was more water you can see kind of heavier puddles, and I like that effect. So I'm going to try and repeat some of that when I do this bottom corner. So now I want the drips on this one to run upward, so I'm just going to turn my paper upside down and gravity's going to pull it downward technically, but when I turn my layout right side up, you'll see that it actually appears as if the drips are flowing upward. And again, I use my brush to draw drips in that water so that when I pull my color, it's going to give pathways to the paint to flow. And I'm going to go through the same process, and I'll just speed you up as I put these colors on the page. So I just chose colors from my photo. So there were pinks and blues in that photo. And actually I was inspired by my daughter's kind of tie-dye sweatshirt that she was wearing. So there was pinks and blues and some yellowy greens in there. So those are the colors I picked. And I'm just gonna spread and blend these. And as we get through it, you'll see that I'm not quite happy with the natural blend. So I will kind of force the blend a little bit by mixing the paints on the table there. And of course I'm going to add some gold into this mix to pull the two areas of the piece together. And for this one I decided to just drip straight onto my page because I didn't want too much more mixing of the greens and blues because it could end up getting too muddy that way. And you can see as I'm starting to work this piece a little bit more with more gold and more water, I start getting too big of a puddle on the bottom, and that's not too much of a problem. You just kind of um, absorb up a little bit of the moisture with the paper towel, and if you're just gentle and do it while it's nice and wet, you'll still get a nice good color blend. And then I'm going to set this piece up against a towel to help gravity draw all the extra drips to the bottom, and that's going to give more moisture to those drippy areas, and when that dries you're going to get a harsher puddle, and that's kind of the look I want to go for that matches up with that black. So that dried up naturally, and you can see how those drips have a much more saturated color to them, and that's because of the concentration of water pulling the color down, and it has a nice shimmer to it with the gold. And of course these paints are called twinkling H2O, so they have a shimmer to them anyway. I just boosted that with the gold. And I'm not going to stop there with the gold. I'm going to add a bunch of spatters to continue this mixed media look. And I'm just using a super wet paint in my fingers and paintbrush and just doing lots of drips and drops. And now that my mixed media background is done, I am ready to pull in the rest of the elements of this layout. I brought in some black cardstock because I like pops of black against bright colors, especially since I've already got black going on in the top corner of the page. And I'm going to map my photos, and I'll decide if I'm going to map both of them or just one of them. I also pulled out my foil quill tool. Now this tool is made to go in a die cut machine, and I'm going to actually use it by hand, and I'll show you a couple of tips on how to do that, and it'll work fine. And I'm going to use these stencils here with that foiling tool and add some stars. So like I said in the beginning, I was going to add some stars to this layout, and this stencil has a few different stars on here. I also pulled out several alphabets to see how I want to do my titles, and I'll end up pulling out yet one more alphabet because I really like to mix and match lettering when I'm doing titles. And I decided to stick with this kind of glittery gold, and I'm going to use these tiny ones. And then also I like to outline my pages, and I think I'm going to use this thicker gold marker, but I pulled out a couple extra ones just to see, because I've been having a hard time matching up shades of gold, and so I want to have some choices here. And then I get to work with the meat of this layout. I know for sure that I want to matte this photo in black, so I go ahead and do that. And I do a pretty thin matte because I don't want the black to overwhelm the layout. I just want it to add that pop of contrast to those colors. And then I think about this photo up here I left with a white border to go against that black paint, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave it that way, so here I am giving it a matte, and I'm going to test it out. I just tacked it down with a tiny bit of adhesive so that I can pull it apart and see which way I like it, and I decide I do like the black matte, even though there's black mixed media back there, because it's not a deep black back there, so this matte does give it a little more pop against the color, so to speak. So I put those down, and then I move on to my title, and you can see I've got that other black alphabet going on that I didn't have earlier. And so I'm going to use this gold glitter just for the heart of the title, which is the number. And then I'm taking these tiny stickers and turning them sideways against my number to add some visual texture, I guess you could say, to this layout. And these tiny letters are a little tricky to work with, and you'll see me fussing with them a little bit as I go along. And once I'm satisfied with the placement of those, I move on to the last word of the title. And the word is going to be old, so this is going to read 1 day old. And I don't have any more L's left on this page. So what do? I just alter some letters. So I take these T's and I'm just going to clip off one side of the T. It's upside down, of course, and now it's got an L. So I'm going to do that for both sections of my layout because I'm using the 1 day old up in the top and then comparing it to 13 years old down in the bottom. So I'm going to finish up that title down there and then we'll move on. So I'm ready for a few finishing touches on this layout, and I grab my gold pens to decide which color I want to use to draw a border around. And I really wanted to use the thick marker, but the color isn't quite right. So I decided to go with a gold pen, and then you can see that marker there, and it's hard to tell on camera, but I'm just not happy with the color, even though I like the thickness. So I just go with the gold pen, and I draw, oh, this is I think it's a Pilot gold pen, and I just draw a line around, and I actually do kind of two messy lines, and this is something I do really frequently because I like the texture and dimension that the two messy lines, and it works with the mixed media background. And then I add a black line also, and part of the reason I do that is to again draw in some more of the black element. And then I thought I would do my journaling in black, but I decided not to do that since I think it would be too much taking away the focus from the photos and the title that really gets to the heart of what I'm trying to say with this layout. So I just have some simple journaling talking about how it seems like magic that this time has passed, and that fits in with the story prompt. And then I just add the dates around my photos just for a little bit more of that gold element and text element to the layout. And then it's time to play with my foil quill tool. Now, like I said, this is made to fit in the die cutting machine. There is a foil tool that's made for hand foiling, but I don't want to buy both tools. That's too expensive. So I got to experimenting with this thing. And yes, you can use it by hand. It's a little tricky. You have to work straight up and down when you're using it. If you're using it freehand, that's not a problem. If you're using a stencil, you do need to make sure your stencils are thin enough that the tip of the quill can fit down inside of it, because that tip isn't very deep. And here I am, I'm just adding some stars, and I'm going to add a mixture of kind of open star shapes by just using the outline of the stencil, and also filled in star shapes where I just scribble inside of that stencil all over until I get a nice filled in shape. In just a moment here, I will lift this up to the camera so you can see there's the open shape compared to the filled in shape I did on the left. And I'm just going to continue using this and adding stars, sprinkling them around my layout wherever I see fit. And I have some wonderful shiny stars on my layout, and I'll give you a little bit of a close-up of how many of these I added here and there. And I am really happy with how lovely this foil quill works by hand. And this foil can go a long way. You can see I've used it for, there's a reindeer there from a Christmas project, and then lots of stars there, and there's still plenty of foil to go around. So I just save all of the partially used sheets in this little page protector, and then I'll be able to keep using them. And very last finishing touch is some black star sequins, and I'm using my jewel picker here to add these onto my layout. And the sequins are old product from Stampin' Up, and I just glue them all down. So I will leave you with some close-up photos of this project. I hope you enjoyed seeing my process and get inspired to do some of your own mixed media layouts. It doesn't have to be too scary, although it can take some time to let things dry. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and get notifications for my future videos.